Chapter 17. Ayianna trudged along the wide path, the old man's warnings ringing in her ears. Doubt, like the ancient forest, closed in around her. He couldn't be trusted, could he? He was part of the forest, and nothing could be trusted in the forest. But then, why had Kale been so shaken? The way turned, and she halted. In the distance, an elaborate gateway glowed in the darkness. Giant marble gates towered above them, set between two pillars spiraling into the treetops. Her doubt fled. "The old fairy kingdom," Kale said. His face had returned to its usual scowl. "Is that good or bad?" asked Vian. "I don't think anything good can be found here." Desmond shrugged. "It doesn't look bad." Ayianna agreed. The strong walls and bright gate seemed secure and inviting. She welcomed an opportunity to rest without fear of the forest or its curse. "Need I remind you three," Kale said through clenched teeth, "that we are still in the forest of Ingano?" Ayianna reached for her talisman. Her heart lurched. It was gone. Fragmented chidings from her father and Kale scolded her, exposing her weaknesses, her laziness. Couldn't Osarin the True One protect her more than a trinket of stone? "What happened to the fairies?" asked Vian as he strained his neck to see the top of the gates. Kale stared at Vian. "Did you receive any worthwhile education?" Vian crossed his arms. "I've received the best education there is to be had on this side of Nalu." "Clearly, you weren't paying attention then. The fairies were slaughtered during the Najiso revolt." "So the revolt cursed the forest?" Ayianna peered into the shadows behind them. In the presence of the old fairy gates, the forest was less fearful, less threatening. Maybe they could camp outside of the gates. No need to bother the inhabitants. "No. Several nymphs had—" "Nymphs?" Ayianna looked up at Kale. "Young fairies that haven't sprouted their wings yet. The nymphs had discovered a portal to the underworld and grew entranced with the Toaz Decon. They convinced many other nymphs to follow them." Ayianna frowned. "What exactly is the Toaz Decon?" "It's the tainted powers of Teiza, queen of the underworld." Kale rested the tip of his longbow on the ground. "The nymphs deposed Queen Leora and overthrew the fairy kingdom, but lost control of the Toaz, cursing the once enchanted forest." "Isn't Leora one of the guardians?" Vian asked. A look of surprise flickered across Kale's face. "Yes, she is the last surviving fairy." "So who lives here now?" Ayianna glanced back at the gates. Had the inhabitants already noticed their presence? "The bad fairies that won, obviously," Desmond said. "No, the guardians condemned them to the abyss. They are what we know today as the imps." "What?" Ayianna asked. "How could those wretched furry creatures be anything like fairies?" "It's a long, complicated story," Kale said. "Some say Teiza had pity on them and gave them fur to cover their nakedness. Some say it was the touch of the Toaz Decon. Others say it grew on them while they adapted to life in the hollows of the abyss." "You're not a bard, are you, Kale?" Desmond eyed him. "These stories seem a bit colorful." Kale arched an eyebrow. "I'm surprised at you, Desmond. As a merchant in the search of royal offices, surely you could have afforded an education." "More than you. My education was practical, not storytelling." "Enough already!" Ayianna glared at them. "What should we do? The path ends here. Do we go back the way we came?" She gestured back. The light had ceased and darkness had retaken the road. "No, we shall see who inhabits Samara now." Desmond started, walking toward the polished gate. Kale shook his head. "Nothing good can live there now. We must go back." "We're tired, hungry, and evening is upon us. Those beasts will come back." Vian tilted his head and rubbed his lower back with his free hand. "I don't know about you, but I don't think I have the energy to spend another sleepless night fending off those Tuyo mutts, whatever you called them." He took off after Desmond. Ayianna tried to think, but exhaustion garbled her thoughts. She glanced at Kale, torn. His grey eyes pleaded with her. Did he actually think she had a choice? She turned away. She'd take her chances with the inhabitants rather than spend one more night in the forest. The gates grew larger as they drew closer. 2 guards clad in silver robes stood at attention on either side of the shimmering gate. A pair of folded wings hung from their shoulders. "Are they fairies?" Ayianna asked, no one in particular. "No," Kale came up behind her. "Hamadryads." "What's a hamadryad?" "They are the dryads of magical trees, and they are female." "Oh, interesting." Ayianna slowed her pace. "What kind of magic do these trees have?" Kale fell into step beside her. "It varies on the tree and their location, but these trees are cursed." They neared the gates and Vian cleared his throat. "Allow me the honor of speaking, since I am a prince. I doubt any of you have been schooled on the etiquettes of the court." Kale shrugged. Before the prince could announce their arrival, the guards clanked their halberds together and thundered in unison, "Who seeks to disturb the kingdom of Mandar?" They didn't look to the left or the right, but in a constant stare out into the dark forest. Vian stepped forward and puffed out his chest. "We are but weary travelers, journeying to the mountains of Zusat. We seek only rest and peace within Mandar." "See," Desmond leaned over Ayianna toward Kale. "It isn't Samara, but Mandar. You got your castles mixed up, storyteller." Kale ignored him. Ayianna focused on the guards as they spoke quietly to one another. After a while, the Hamadryads faced the travelers, stepped aside, and smiled. "Very well. Enter and be at peace." Ayianna didn't like their smile, but before she could figure out why, the white gates inched open, giving her ample time to process the incredible view. Their foreboding trees gave way to a clear night sky. Brilliant stars twinkled high in the heavens. The full moon hung its blue-white head over the treetops, splashing the city below with a luminous glow. Massive walls held back the gloomy forest, making way for a white marble castle towering above well-kept gardens. Slender trees glistened in the center of the gardens, surrounding a large one adorned with gold apples. A young Hamadryad glided toward them. A wide, black belt gathered her green robes at the waist. Her face was that of a sapling tree, the bark smooth and bright. Long golden vines wrapped around her head like hair, glittering as if stardust had fallen from the heavens and had settled on her head. Her fluttering iridescent wings brought her near. "Welcome, weary travelers," she said. Her melodic voice floated on the breeze. "I am Tivona, the maidservant of the Queen of Mandar. I will show you to your quarters, where you all may rest. You are just in time for the festivities. The Queen will be delighted." "Festivities?" Ayianna yawned. Tivona motioned for them to follow. The fatigued travelers obeyed and stumbled into the marble halls. Liam's toenails clicked along the marble floor, echoing off the vacant walls as Tivona led them deeper into the castle. The corridor opened into a courtyard filled with sweet-smelling flowers and fruit trees. 3 archways encircled the aromatic garden. "The menfolk will stay in these rooms. We have separate quarters for our female guests." Ayianna twisted the straps of her bag. She didn't want to be separated from the only familiarity she knew, but she was too tired to protest as she was guided away. Tivona led her back through the corridor into the main hallway and then down another hall to the right. The hall emptied out into a massive courtyard filled with flowering bushes and water fountains. Marble walls surrounded the garden, stretching toward the sky. Archways in the walls led to other parts of the castle. A second floor, with 4 doors and a balcony, sat above the archways. Smooth stone steps led up to those rooms. Tivona glided up the steps to the right. "You shall stay the night here." She pressed open the heavy wooden door into a dark room. She cupped her hands and blew on it. Little lights danced upon her hand. Then she flung the dancing lights across the room, and immediately the room brightened as if the sun had popped its head in and smiled. To the left of Ayianna lay a gigantic bed filled with pillows. To her right, a half-wall separated the bathing area, and a plush armchair sat next to the wall. A green robe and a white nightgown were draped over one of its arms. A thick bath towel hung over the other. "Your bath has been prepared," Tivona said, and instantly steam rose from behind the half-wall. "Rest well, my dear." Then she bowed her way out of the room and closed the thick door behind her. "Liam, this is beautiful," Ayianna exclaimed. Desmond's plans for their future fleeted across her mind. "I could definitely live in a castle." She slipped off her cloak and smiled. The guardians would straighten everything out, and then her and Desmond could be married within a year. She knelt down and untied her boots. Her brother's dagger slid out. The cold blade anchored her to reality and sobered her short-lived giddiness. What secret took her father's life? Who had taken her mother? Would the guardians help her? She pulled off the boots and slipped the dagger back inside. We must not think on these things, right, Liam? The wolf cocked her head, shook her body, and strutted off to investigate the room. Ayianna pulled her brother's clothes off and placed them over the half-wall. Tattered and stained from the trip, they would have to be replaced soon. Should she wash them? Maybe in the morning. She reached up and removed her betrothal pin. The burning, aching chasm of grief reappeared. The blue stone glimmered in the soft light. Its delicate petals were bent like a broken flower in a windstorm. Why hadn't she packed it away? She blinked back tears, set it down on the half-wall, and undid her braid. Steam wafted up from the sunken bath, welcoming her tired and sore body. She oozed into the hot water, savoring its warmth and support. Her scratches burned, but she sank deeper. For once, she was safe. No more running, no more beasts to hunt her in her dreams. The men who pursued her, gone. They would never find her now. She lingered in her moment of peace, but exhaustion weighed heavily on her. Sleep would come soon, and she would welcome it. After a while, she dabbed her tender face and hands with a sponge she found lying next to the bath. Liam growled. Ayianna jolted upright, her heart racing. What had happened? Had she fallen asleep? Disoriented, she climbed out and peered around the room. Liam sniffed at the base of the heavy door. Its thick wood muffled a knock, and the door began to creep open. Ayianna snatched the towel from the chair and dashed behind the half-wall. How could she be so foolish? Why hadn't she locked the door? She waited, but Liam didn't attack. She gripped the towel around her and peered over the tiled wall. Forgive me, please. Cale turned away. What was he doing here? Give me a moment. She grabbed the nightgown and slipped it over her head. Donning the green robe, she joined Cale at the door. Would you like to sit? Ayianna pointed to a large stuffed chair against the wall. I'm not staying long. Cale fidgeted with his sword belt. Doing all right, then? I guess so. She pulled out a brush from her knapsack and began untangling her long hair. Why are you here? Well, you looked a little frightened earlier, so I thought I would check on you. Really? Her brush snagged, and then she untangled the knot. Well, I'm fine now. Cale nodded and glanced around the room. Nice quarters. All we have are small, stiff cots for sleeping, and we're all in the same room, no less. As soon as we got settled, Desmond fell asleep. Didn't know somebody could snore that loudly. Did you know he snores? Ayianna frowned. I suppose you didn't come all the way up here just to compare rooms, or to get me in trouble with Desmond again. If he knew you were here. He clenched his jaw. Saeed wouldn't have given the warning to stick to the trail if he knew a place of refuge could supposedly be found in the forest of Engano. Something about this whole place isn't right. Maybe. Maybe not, she yawned. Either way, we'll leave at daybreak. He stepped through the doorway and disappeared into the night. The heavy door swung shut behind him. Exhaustion pushed his warning from her mind. She checked for a lock, but didn't find one. She shrugged and climbed into the gigantic bed, sinking into its soft pillows. For a moment, she lingered, enjoying the comfort, and then she fell into a deep sleep.